Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Police Off the Cuff, day 54 of the Nancy Guthrie kidnapping. A major development. Savannah Guthrie breaks her silence in a heartbreaking interview, revealing new details about what may have happened inside that house and why her mother may have been targeted. We're going to break down the interview, the evidence, and what it tells us about the kidnappers from a real law enforcement perspective. So we're now 54 days into the kidnapping of 84-year-old Nancy Guthrie. And here's what we know. She was taken from her home in Tucson in the early morning hours of February 1st. Evidence at the scene clearly indicates an abduction, not a voluntary disappearance. There's still no arrest and no confirmed suspect in custody. What makes this case even more troubling is this. The investigation has produced evidence but no resolution. Quick reminder, if you're looking for real crime insight, not YouTube theories, this channel is different. I'm a retired NYPD Sergeant, and on Police Off the Cuff, we analyze cases the way cops and prosecutors do. What matters, what doesn't, and what the internet gets wrong. If that's the perspective you want, subscribe now because this isn't entertainment, it's experience. And folks, I'd like to remind everyone that the Police Off the Cuff podcast is sponsored by FanDuel on the Believe Network. FanDuel is our sponsor. So, folks, hold on to your hats, hold on to your loved ones, hold on to your thoughts, hold on to your prayers. You're about to enter true crime from a police perspective. You're about to enter the Off the Cuff zone, the Police Off the Cuff zone. There has to be some common sense.
They were the ones who called 911 to get him help, and now they're calling for change.
Joining us today after a brief hiatus, just due to a busy life and other jobs, is retired NYPD Sergeant, professor at Albertus Magnus College in Connecticut, attorney at law. Welcome to the show, Professor Mike Geary. Welcome, Mike.
Hey, Bill, good to see you after that little absence. Thank you for having me back on.
I'm not used to having you absent, Mike. We need you. The folks that watch the show, they're like, where's Mike Geary? You know, he's the level-headed one of this crew. That's true. But Mike, you know, some new information, and not smoking gun type, but we're going to watch some of Savannah Guthrie's interview on her own network, the Today Show. And she did let out some investigative, I'll use the word News Nation says, although I don't like this expression, nuggets, some investigative new nuggets, right? One of them was that she believes that the back door to her mother's house was unlocked. That answers a lot of people's questions in regards to how did the kidnappers get in, right? She also says that she believes that her mother was targeted because of her. That could be extremely significant. And let's realize something. It is March 26th, and we're 54 days in. Right. Don't you think she told the police this right at the very beginning? Of course she did. But it's just coming out now because perhaps she's trying to shake the proverbial tree by getting people to call in and to help in this investigation. And she's been very clear that she wants the public to help. Mike, your thoughts?
Yeah, it's a gut-wrenching interview with Hoda, her co-host, and you feel for her and you feel for the entire family. And one of the themes she talks about is, please, someone step up, do the right thing. Please make that call. You know, whatever you can give, you know, make that call. Please bring home my mom. And that's really, really rough to sit through and hear that. It's tough. But yeah, the idea that the back door was unlocked, you know, look, we all occasionally forget to lock a window, lock a door and things like that at night. That happens to all of us. So it could be that the person who was part of the kidnapping may have been in the home, legally and may be invited there like a repair person. That's one of the theories. And they may have surreptitiously unlocked the back door. Or sometimes people just forget, or they just make a habit of it. They feel very, very comfortable, and they don't really worry all that much because they may have lived in an area for many years with very little crime, and they don't feel scared whatsoever by it. And so, that answered that question for us is, we know they didn't get in the front. Did they get in the back or through a window? Now it appears that they may have just been able to enter, I would imagine, some sort of sliding glass door or something on a patio by that by the back patio and by the pool. And that would answer a lot of questions. And remember, there was the issue of that dog that started barking or about 2:00 in the morning, and that the dog was looking and the owner said was facing the Guthrie property. So it may be that that's exactly how this all happened. It's a tough interview to sit through. And it's very, very educational for people, because you start to realize there are little things that the family may have been told, a month ago, that we're just finding out now.
Well, Mike, Pauline Buckles from the chat says, but Mike, according to Fox News, the door was propped open. Pauline, that could mean a lot of things.
Yeah.
Could this have been someone that worked on her house that knew that she kept a spare key in a certain location and opened the door and propped it open for the bad guys, for the kidnappers? It could be a million things. We don't know. But yes, that we know now the door was open. So what does that tell us to the whole, the evidence that we have that someone came through the front door? In fact, we have this person on video, right? And tried to cover up the camera, but apparently didn't go through the front door, at least to enter, but must have gone through the front door to exit, because there is blood evidence on the front doorstep, right? So this tells us a bunch of things. So who propped open the back door? And then if that in fact was done, how come this knucklehead, the kidnapper here with the mask and the backpack and the gun, how come he didn't know that apparently and was trying to cover up the front entrance? That doesn't make a hell of a lot of sense to me, Mike.
Yeah, it is strange, but if you think about it in a weird way, and as you're talking about it, I'm just keep going over this in my mind, try to think like a perpetrator. If someone's coming in the back door, but you want to take them out the front door, this may be the assistant who goes around the front and tries to block the camera with leaves, which sounds silly enough, but tries to block the camera because they know they're planning on taking her out the front, because there may be a car that may be just a little bit off camera, but that, just a little bit out of sight, but that may be waiting. That's the only halfway intelligent, logical thing I think that they might have been thinking, because there has to be a reason why this person did what they did. There's a logical reason. It looks stupid. It looked kind of bizarre, taking leaves and things like that rather than duct tape. But possibly with that security gate in front of the camera, they may not have been able to get to the camera lens itself. We're not sure, but there's a reason why that person did what they did, and I think it may have to do with they were planning on taking her out the front door, maybe.
Well, I think that's obvious that she was taken out the front door.
Yeah.
Or else, where would the confirmed blood that
Right.
belongs to her, where would that come from if they didn't take her out? This is from local news station 10.
With one expert telling us only a tip from the public will help solve the case of Savannah Guthrie's missing mum.
Today, the Aussie-born American was back on TV, not as a host, but as a tearful guest, making a desperate new appeal.
We are in agony. It is unbearable.
Savannah Guthrie, tearful, tormented, and bravely opening up.
And to think of what she went through. I wake up every night, in the middle of the night, every night. And in the darkness, I imagine her terror.
She's talking about her mum, 84-year-old Nancy Guthrie, who vanished, feared abducted from her home in Arizona more than 50 days ago.
Nancy was taken from her home against her will.
Ominous video of this masked man was captured on her porch.
This is a 84-year-old lady who is in need of medication.
For a case that's captivated global headlines, it's produced very few answers. Australian-born Savannah using this interview to issue a desperate plea.
Someone needs to do the right thing.
There is a desperation and also a steeliness about Savannah. I mean, she's hoping that somebody, whoever this person is, will see something and say something.
Private investigator Brian Fitzgibbons thinks that hope is valid.
I believe that it will be a tip from the public that breaks this case. When that comes is impossible to predict.
He says while law enforcement officers plough through 30,000 tips and 10,000 hours of surveillance video and await DNA and genetic genealogy results, one member of the public with the right information and motivation from the family's $1.2 million reward could crack the case instantly, especially if this leading theory is correct.
It's more likely than not that she was targeted in a kidnapping for ransom plot for monetary gain due to Savannah's prestige and wealth. Shortly after she was abducted, that something happened that led to the death of Mrs. Guthrie. I think that's a very plausible theory that would drive these perpetrators underground almost immediately.
In that case, while the kidnappers might never come forward, people who know them just might.
Somebody associated with them will find out. Someone will recognize a change in behavior pattern over the last 50 days and point the finger at them and try to collect that money.
In the meantime, all the Guthrie family members have are their questions, hopes, and fears.
It is unthinkable, but those thoughts demand to be thought. And I will not hide my face. But she needs to come home now.
You know, even if, the Savannah Guthrie, she needs to come home. And of course, can you imagine this was your mom? First of all, not knowing what in fact happened to her inside that house. And there are the law enforcement experts, specifically Orange County retired prosecutor Matt Murphy, who's a talking head now for ABC. He says right out in an interview, and I'll show you part of the interview later, that he believes she was killed right away inside the house. And then for whatever reason, she was removed from that house. That's one hell of a scary prediction. And then there are those that think there's so many different theories that I don't even like to conjecture in a way, because many people had said early on, this is not a classical kidnapping. Something else is going on here. But then all of these people that have said this in the beginning, I think now, 54 days later, they're not coming back on, are they? I think they're baffled, as they're not really sure, as I'm not. I'll admit that right now. I'm not sure what happened here. And, was it a burglary gone bad? Was it a home invasion from minute one? Was it a targeted kidnapping from minute one? What was it? And I believe whoever did this, and I think it's more than one person, did target Nancy Guthrie because she is the mom of Savannah Guthrie. So that would tell us that this is about money. But then why hasn't the kidnapping ransoms been followed up? And Savannah Guthrie said in her interview that she thought at least 2 of the 5 ransom notes were legit. But I don't know how she's really qualified to say that. Some people in law enforcement said they think all 5 were absolute bullshit, that were people who are criminals that wish to jump on the bandwagon and see if they could scam some money out of this. Look, we also had people saying, oh, I know where they are. I'm just after the reward. Give me 1 Bitcoin. I mean, come on. Are you kidding me? Right there, that screams scam immediately. Mike.
Yeah, Bill, there's so little information that has come out in the past, say, month and a half last say 40 days from the FBI is tight-lipped. Nanos makes these interesting comments that really she shouldn't be making. But we don't know. We don't know if this was she interrupted a burglary, as many people think it could be. There's enough information that is publicly known that you could categorize it as a kidnapping gone wrong, a home invasion of just to try to terrorize this lady, or a burglary. But money is always the root and cause of a lot of things, and so people want to make money. I believe, and I think a lot of people believe, that this was not a coincidence that they picked on this particular 84-year-old lady out of the clear blue just by coincidence. They knew who she was. They knew she was alone. They knew her, probably generally her age, that she was an elderly person. They knew probably who her mom was because she had done a show. Savannah had done a show there, and went to the local her favorite restaurant, and you kind of featured her life a little bit growing up there. And that was wonderful. But evil people see what a lot of other things that people see, and they look at that and go, I think I can make some money off this. That's the way they think. And an 84-year-old lady looks like an easy target. If it was a classic kidnapping, I believe that it went haywire, it went sideways, whatever you want to call it, real fast, and without proof of life. And we've never seen even one iota of proof that poor Nancy Guthrie is alive. Either that's a kidnapping gone wrong and there's nothing left, and they've gone underground completely, like the narrator suggested. But whatever it is, hopefully we will get a resolution quickly and actually come to a conclusion with some sort of statement from the FBI as to this, a statement of fact as to what actually happened in chronological order, so that we could actually understand what happened to this poor lady.
From the chat, at Lynn T5096, I think the kidnappers, because they messed up, let time go by and then claim they found the body and tried to get the reward. Interesting theory. I don't know if they would take that risk. At Ali this, Ali that, so many scammers. I don't think we ever saw the 2 ransoms, the real notes, just junk from TMZ. Yeah, I'm in the agreement with Orange County prosecutor Matt Murphy, who stated on a TV interview that he believes every single one of those ransom notes were absolute bullshit. They're not true. They're not. And look, proof of the pudding of that is they refuse to give a proof of life. Right. If anything is going to tell you that the ransom notes are a scam, it's the fact that they refuse to give a proof of life, which means they didn't have the person to be able to get the information they would need to answer a question on a proof of life. Honeydew Life, the kidnapping people are going to be living note on Nancy's property in the garden, plus check the jewelry. They took Nancy's necklace. Which one? I'm not sure, Honeydew Life, if I agree with you. Byington 3798, targeted kidnapping gone wrong. Could very well be. We're not shutting the door on that. Very possibly this is a targeted kidnapping. This is Fox News with breaking down some of the interview of Savannah Guthrie today.
That you are used to, where someone wanders off, she can't wander off. Mm-hmm. My mom, she was in tremendous pain. Yeah. Her back was very bad. She was trying to, on a good day, she could walk down to the mailbox and get the mail, but most days not. So there was no wander off. And the doors were propped open. Yeah. And there was blood on the front doorstep. And the Ring camera had been yanked off. This is not okay. Yeah. This isn't, something is very wrong here.
So moments ago, Savannah Guthrie revealing brand new details about the moments they discovered their mother was missing 7 weeks ago. Fox News contributor and retired FBI supervisor special agent James Galliano has been covering this case from the very beginning and joins us now. James, good to see you, my friend. 2 things stick out to me. One, she refers to her mother in past tense. That was new. The second thing is she introduces this new detail about the back doors being propped open. What do you make of that?
Yeah, LJ, a couple of big takeaways, and I think you're onto something here. The first is it's heart-wrenching to listen to this videotaped interview. Savannah is going through survivor's guilt right now. Guilt, remorse, feelings of worthlessness, feeling like this was her fault when it was clearly not. And look, as we're looking at the drone footage from our drone team right now of the backyard, the big takeaway I took from this interview was the fact that she said doors, multiple doors, were propped open in the back. Now, we know early on in the investigation, the sheriff had insinuated that there might have been forcible entry and then walked it back in later interviews and said there was no forcible entry. So did someone have a key? Was there a keypad there? Or was the door left unlocked?
You know, here he is, James Galliano, whatever, however he wants to pronounce his name. A knowledgeable guy, articulate guy. It's very possible, like she probably had multiple people working. That's a huge house.
Yeah.
There's no way, look, she's 84 years old. She's doing any of the work on her property. She's bringing people in. So there's a whole network of potential perps. And that would be the first part of the victimology that law enforcement would look into immediately is who was working at her house, who's her landscaper, who's her gardener, does she have a cook, who cleans the house, all of those things. And all of those people must be dug into, and not just them, but peripherally their families. And how do you do that? You may ask, well, you get a person that works for her, and then you do a little family tree, and you do record checks, you do DMV checks on the family, you do financial checks, all of these things it's voluminous. It's a lot of work, but that's how investigation is done. And could she have left a key, or that all the workers knew where the key was to enter the house? Look, how many of us do that? How many people do that without raising your hand and admitting to it? People do that, have a hide a key or something, right? Because how many people lock themselves out of their own house? You don't have to answer that, but just there are people lock themselves out of their own house. How the hell are you getting back in? You leave your key with your neighbor? What if your neighbor's not home and it's 2 degrees out, So all of these are distinct possibilities. Mike, your thoughts?
Yeah, Bill, as you're talking, I'm thinking, okay, all of the people that would be servicing their house, like say the bushes, the pool, and in that interview, Savannah's talking about her mother not being able to wander off because there are times where she could make it to the mailbox at the end of her driveway, and most of the time she couldn't. So that means there's a home health aide. And so that person has to be interviewed too. And also what I want from all the people who are interviewed that may have been on that property legally, wanting to be on that property, I want to see their cell phones too. Who are they communicating with? In addition to family trees and things like that. As you say, it's voluminous. It's going to take a lot of subpoenas and search warrants. It's going to take a lot of time and effort, a lot of man hours to go over all this information. But you got to, because they're the key to what the police are looking for. It's going to look like a needle in a haystack, but you need just that one message, that one email, that one person that could break the case. And to break the case wide open without even a confession or anything else or a phone call, but some little tidbit of information. And that's what they're looking for. But yeah, the idea that there's all these people coming in and out because she needs a lot of help. I'm sure if there was people from when you get groceries, they delivered them right to the front door. And, all of these things. And people see an 84-year-old woman and she's not in good health and she can barely walk around. She's got a cane and you're coming to her house doing things on a daily basis or a weekly basis with, say, groceries, you start to see things. And if you're a perp, you see a plan developing pretty quickly on how I could get something out of this. And so I think that's where the police are absolutely digging the hardest, is for those sort of people.
Absolutely. From the chat at Sherry Sophia, the ransom notes that Savannah thinks to be real needs to be released to the public. Perhaps someone could identify the kidnapper through the writings or the ransom notes. At Sherry Sophia, that's not Savannah's decision. It's also not Savannah's decision to say she thinks 2 of them were real. She could give her opinion, but ultimately it's law enforcement's decision whether or not they think those ransom notes that were sent to a TV station, whether they think they're legit. And if there was any reason to release them to the public, I believe they would do so. But they're not thinking. So let's not cloud the case by releasing. What's going to result if you release the 2 ransom notes that Savannah said she felt was legit? What's going to result in is another 30,000 tips that are useless tips. Do they want to cloud the investigation with that? I don't think so. I don't think they're going to do that. What we were talking about was the victimology, which should have been done very early in this case. They should be done with that now. But that doesn't mean they don't go back to people in the victimology, people that worked for Nancy Guthrie, people who were in the house, cleaners, landscapers, gardeners, delivery people. All of these people, you keep that close to the vest. You may have to go back and re-interview them. But for now, all of that information should have been discussed. And again, if they don't have the evidence to bring anyone forward, then they just got to keep continuing with this investigation. Is there any doubt, this picture up on the screen, that this is at least one of the bad guys, right? Maybe 2 if you look at the picture next to it. Maybe that's 2 of the bad guys dressed identically, it seems, and perhaps on a different day. But guess what? This picture taken from a video of this guy with a backpack on, with a mask on, carrying a gun, has resulted in 0 in regards to getting him identified. I would have thought when I first saw this, when I did first see this, I was like, wow, the phone's going to ring off the hook and this guy's going to get identified. Someone's going to know who he is and someone's going to give him up. Day 54, guess what? No one has come forward to saying that they know this guy. No one. So yes, do we know this is one of the bad guys or maybe 2 of the bad guys side by side? Yeah. But we haven't identified them yet, have we?
No.
We don't even know specifically what actually happened inside that house. Disturbing to anyone in law enforcement, anyone with a clear thinking brain, that the perpetrators were inside that house for 41 minutes. Horrible, right? What happened during those 41 minutes? We don't even want to conjecture. Absolutely horrific. Go back to Fox News.
And second of all, Lawrence, this was another huge takeaway for me. Savannah basically assesses that 2 of the ransom notes, the ones that the family responded to, in her words, were real. I think those are the 2 biggest takeaways from this interview.
Let's go back to.
But something James Gagliano knows, she may think it's real, but if law enforcement doesn't think it's real and there is no proof of life coming forth for either one of those ransom notes, then we can't take them seriously. And James Gagliano knows that. So how could you take seriously 2 ransom notes that Savannah Guthrie says she thinks are legit? Then when you ask for a proof of life, crickets, Mike.
Yeah, without that proof of life, you have to assume, and I believe the FBI assumes pretty correctly that without that proof of life, those 2 ransom notes, even if it appears somehow without the proof of life that you think it's legit, that if I was going to, you got to think like a perp. If I was going to kidnap someone and I wanted a ransom, I would have to have a picture of say in this case, Nancy Guthrie holding a newspaper, holding something to show what the day was, what the time was, like a newspaper article, something like that on, and that would convince law enforcement that this is legit. But without that, I think the FBI rightly assumes it's not legit. And I think part of what Savannah is saying is that she wants to believe it's legit. She wants to believe that her mom is still being held for ransom, and that for some reason, they're not contacting her, but that she's still alive, and that this was a legitimate and complete kidnapping, and that she's still alive. I think that it's giving her just a little bit of hope to hang on to, but is from my point of view, I don't think so. Not at all.
At Jason Bourne, 867 from the chat, so much skepticism over the ransom, and now we learn Savannah believed the demands. Wow. Jason Bourne, I'm going to ask you a question. Would you rather Savannah make the decision or would you rather experienced FBI agents make the decision based on procedure, based on the ransom notes, based on there was no proof of life? So who's going to make the decision, Jason? That's the question I have for you. And clearly, if you're clear thinking and honest, you say, well, think of the emotion that Savannah Guthrie is going through. Think of the guilt she's going through. So do you want her to make that decision that, oh, I believe these 2 ransom notes are legit, but yet if you step back from that and you're a professional law enforcement, i.e. the FBI, they're going to say, wait, there's no proof of life. We cannot take either one of these ransom notes as being legit because there's no proof of life. And we've asked for a proof of life. Back to James Galliano from Fox.
The initial point about the back doors being propped open, since you were on the scene, and we remember that Hilo observing that area and the ground team doing the grid search back there, where could he have taken her that direction? Is it terrain going out the back door?
Yeah. No, it would be too difficult. I mean, Lawrence, this is arduous terrain. I mean, it's undulating hills. You've got saguaro cactuses. You've got all kinds.
All right, undulating and arduous. Great words, James. But however, let's realize that Nancy Guthrie couldn't walk more than like 50 feet by herself, which means she would have had to be carried. So the back escape route or going into those arduous terrain, as you explained, it would have been impossible. So in my mind, it's proof of the pudding. She went out the front door because her blood is there. What other evidence do you need to say that's where she was taken out? The front door. And you must also put 2 and 2 together and say they had a vehicle. They had a car. There's no way they carried an 84-year-old woman on their back for a great distance. No, they had to have put her inside a car. 2 and 2 together, they maybe came through the back door, but they left out the front door. Mike?
Yeah, they had to do it that way. And if you're going to kidnap somebody, you're not going to go out the back where there are undulating hills and arduous treks up and down through, scrub brush and cactus, because you're not going to go far yourself. And I don't care how big and strong you are, you're not going very far in that respect. The only thing that you could even think of is if they went through the back, you've got that dog in the back that might have started barking. I think Allie this and Allie that made a comment in the chat about that earlier, and I think she's right. Yeah, they know they got to go out the front door. It's the easiest. That's where you get the car closest to the front door. And so therefore they did it that way. Yeah, that's how you do it. You don't sit there and do it any other way. You got to get out of there quickly. And you do not want to, you want to make this easy as possible. And you want to give yourself some distance. If you start walking through the underbrush with carrying a lady, you're not going far and you're going very slow. You go out the front door, you put her in a car, in the trunk of a car, in the back seat of a car, you can get out of there real fast. That's the one weakness they have, is that there are some cameras, maybe not a lot, but there are some traffic cameras in the area. And that's the one thing that the FBI could hope for, that you get a license plate and a description of the vehicle. But yeah, the idea that they went through the back, no.
At Mindy-R2S, if they thought they were legit, why didn't she pay the ransom? Because she was advised not to by the FBI, which is my thoughts, and I don't have inside information. That's what happened. But what were we talking about the whole first few days or the first week of this case was proof of life. In fact, I think we were the first show that had on the great NYPD Lieutenant Jack Cambria, who teaches hostage negotiation all over this country and has worked on more kidnappings probably than anybody. He also suggested they need a proof of life. And I'm sure even if Savannah Guthrie thought these were legit, the FBI told her, no, do not pay this ransom. It's almost like giving the money away to people who you don't even know are the kidnappers. Because if they can't give a proof of life, we got to assume, not more than assume, we have to say they're not the kidnappers. There's some scam artists putting these kidnapping letters through a TV station, right? great ratings for the TV station, but not great ratings for law enforcement because they didn't feel that these kidnapping letters were true at all. They were not legit.
Of unforgiving landscape there. What I surmise, and again, from having been 5 feet away from the front door, what I surmise is that a vehicle had to be brought into that half circular driveway. You could escape the Nest or the Ring doorbell camera from that perspective. You could park it by the garage, come around to the back door and go in that way. Why the kidnapper or kidnappers felt the need to disable the Nest camera, that leads me to believe that they thought that that camera could pick something up from the roadway. Now, we know how dark it is out in the desert at night, and that Ring camera or Nest camera only picked up movement out to about 10 feet. They're slated to go out to 30 feet, and I think they did that as a precaution. But then you've got the blood spatter also on the front porch, and we know that that blood came back to Nancy Guthrie.
You brought up the Ring camera. Here's Savannah Guthrie talking about.
So he doesn't say you got the blood of Nancy Guthrie on the front door, and it is her blood. Mm-hmm. But he doesn't say, so she was taken out the front door.
Right.
That's the only, evidence you can say that she came out this door because her blood's here. And there is evidence of that. So I don't know why he didn't say that. But that's what you have to conclude by the fact. And he's talking about they may have parked in that circular driveway and then come through the back door. But no doubt she was brought out. She was kidnapped out through the front door.
That watch.
When the Ring camera video surfaced and you could see who that person was, just tell me what you thought when you saw those images of the person who took your mother.
I mean, it's just absolutely terrifying.
Yeah.
It's just totally terrifying. And I can't imagine that is who she saw standing over her bed.
James.
Yeah, I think, again, this goes back to the survivor's guilt. She's watching this video, and again, the FBI's Operational Technology Division, along with the commercial companies, did a great job of digging this video up that's on the screen. And look, Lawrence, I've been doing this prognostication business for a long time, and I'm 99% right when I suggest, hey, this person or these people will be apprehended. But we're into day 54 right now. And remember, the Brian Koberger case took 47 days for them to be able to bring him into custody. But I think the proximity to the Mexico border makes this inherently more difficult. And going back to the Dark Skies Initiative, there just wasn't enough camera evidence. There wasn't enough imagery because of how dark it is out there. And the fact that the cameras that were put out by the municipality, they don't track license plates. They basically just make gauges on how much traffic is coming or going. That's what's made this exceedingly difficult. I still believe that we will find out who did this. Every day that goes by just becomes more difficult to believe that it's going to be a successful reunion with Savannah and her mother.
I just want to comment on this. Someone from the chat at Carlac 9177. I'm shocked you would suggest that, Bill. Family are not experts. Family are not experienced in law enforcement. Family should not call the shots. I stand by that 100%. The experts here are the FBI. They work on kidnappings all the time, right? You're filled with emotion. And as James Gagliano said, survivor's guilt. Savannah Guthrie believes her mother was targeted because of her position, of her wealth, all of those things, right? So the family is not experts. And for Savannah, she may think that one of those or two of those ransom notes were legit. But guess what? Had she acted upon that, she would have given $1 million to some scam artists, not to the real kidnappers, because they couldn't give a proof of life. Why don't you understand that? If you don't have a proof of life, you don't have the person who was kidnapped. Mike.
That's solid protocol. You have to have proof of life. It's like tell you in law school, an attorney who represents himself in court has a fool for a client because you're emotional. You have to have a detached person looking at the case. The FBI are detached. They've been through this before. This is not their first rodeo. And for Savannah, she could look. She may be suffering from survivor's guilt. This is her mom. I would be in the same position as her. I'd be like, oh my God, we got to pay the ransom, get my mom back. Absolutely, let's do whatever they say and hope for the best. And the FBI would be like, sorry, Mike, no, you can't do that. And they would be in the right, and I would be in the wrong, because once your emotions get work their way into your calculations, it throws everything awry, and you start to go off track. Everybody understands and appreciates the Guthrie family's agony, and that's absolute. But in this case, you got to go with what the FBI says to do, even if you don't believe it's the right way to go. You got to go with that because they do have a track record of being able to successfully do these cases. And that's it. That's the bottom line.
At Jason Bourne, 867, family had the right to pay. It was their money. They had the final call, in my opinion. You know, Jason, you could be right. But guess what? The family listened to the FBI because they had common sense. They had intelligence to realize that the FBI was telling them, don't give them the money, because they have not shown, and I sound like a parrot repeating over and over, they have not shown you a proof of life. So do not give them the money. And obviously, Savannah and her family listened to the FBI, and I think that was the correct decision. Pauline Buckles from the chat, Savannah maybe feels guilt because she wasn't there, but it's Annie and T who should feel guilt because they were there. Well, look, no one expects their 84-year-old mother to be kidnapped. And we all do things every single day that people could say, oh, you should have walked her to the door, or you should have done that. Yeah, you should have probably, but you didn't. So do they have to feel guilty for the rest of their life over that? Larry Talbot, 664, thanks for the $2 super sticker. Perp felt his power watching Savannah cry on TV. Yeah, look, good point, Larry, because the perps are still out there. They're still out there, and I think most people, and none of us have a crystal ball, but most of us in law enforcement believe that Nancy Guthrie is no longer alive. It's 54 days. She's 84 years old. She needed medication. She's not the healthiest woman on this earth. So she's probably not alive any longer. Back to Fox 5 with James Gagliano.
I got to get this last shot in because there's this emotional moment where Savannah takes some responsibility. Watch.
There are a lot of different notes, I think, that came. And I think most of them, it's my understanding, are not real. And I didn't see them. But, you know, a person that would send a fake ransom note really has to look deeply at themselves. And I just say, I'm so sorry, Mommy. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry to my sister and my brother and my kids and my nephew and Tommy and my brother-in-law. I'm like, so sorry. I'm so sorry. If it is me, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
That's heavy duty guilt. And, you know, obviously Savannah feels that her mom, and this is, you know, new evidence as far as the true crime community goes, but I'm sure she told the FBI this and the police this, that she felt, Savannah Guthrie felt that her mother Nancy was targeted because of her. And I don't know if she has any other evidence or any other information that she could potentially share how she knows that, but that happens to be a fact. Folks, this is Police Off the Cuff. If you're not subscribed, hit that subscribe button, give us a like, share us with your friends and family, and make lots of comments that will help our algorithm and help our show grow, and we really appreciate that. If you want to contribute to us financially, we have a Patreon with 4 different levels, and we have a YouTube channel membership, and you can become part of the Police Off the Cuff family by joining our YouTube channel. You'd be what's known as an off the cuffer, a police off the cuffer. So thank you for listening in today. So, Mike, some new things today. And this case obviously is a very difficult case. And you heard James Gagliano talk about some of the technology that is relied upon in many investigations that this community just does not have. They do not have a license plate readers in this community. They have maybe some video cameras that are just checking the amount of traffic, but they do not have license plate readers, which perhaps would have already solved this case if they did. A lot of other technological things were shut down, the Ring cameras, all of those things. They've had to go to extreme means just to collect the video and the images that they had that we thought, like the picture up on the screen, that we thought was going to solve this case as soon as that came out. And guess what? So far, it has not solved the case, even with the $1 million reward. Mike.
Yeah, Bill, when those images first came out, you, me, and Phil, we talked about that a lot. And I opined, and I believe that they were going to solve the case within a matter of a week. There would be someone who would say, I recognize that person's build. I kind of recognize that jacket, the way they walk, their gait. And not to have that is rather strange, even with that huge reward. What I'm hopeful is that the police may already have a person or two, whether you want to call them a person, a suspect, or a person of interest, that they're looking into. And I'm hoping that they're just trying to gather technological information that takes a long time, geofencing, things like that. You got to get all the information from a private company. I'm hoping that's the status. I'm not sure, but the technology that's out there is amazing. It has solved many violent crimes. However, if the technology isn't working, like say on the house of the Ring cameras, or they just don't have it because they don't want to have street lights, and they don't want to have cameras, maybe because people are afraid that the municipality is checking out license plates. Maybe it's a privacy issue, but to not have it, it's better to have and not need that technology than to need it and not have it. And so therefore there could be that real gap where unfortunately the perpetrators of this crime have been lucky enough where the technology wasn't present at the time where it was needed to get images of them, to get a license plate of them, and that's where we're at 54 days out. That's a long time.
100%. This is Savannah on the Today Show.
Always in the present tense.
Yeah. I mean, she is present tense to me.
Do you feel her, or have you heard her any moments?
Yeah, a little bit.
Tell me about your mommy. Just tell me about her.
My mom she's incredible. She's resolute and strong. Quiet strength, quiet faith, but hard fought. She's funny and a little mischievous, I would say, in her humor. She's a noble creature. She does what's right. She walks in faith, but not a fake, pious, put on faith, but like a grounded, earthy, she fought for it faith.
When you posted Please Pray in the beginning, the ocean of love and prayers, did you feel that? Did you sense what was happening?
I do feel prayers, I do. I believe that. I think she would have been just amazed, just truly amazed.
One of the images that stayed with me through all of this was you and Annie and Tommaso walking up and looking at the flowers and at the notes. As I saw that, I thought, I wonder if Savannah's going inside, and what that must have felt like for you to go inside of your childhood home, your mom's house.
Yeah, I mean, This is the house that we grew up in. It's really the only house I've ever known and remember. So we moved there when I was about 4, I think. It's the house where I came home on a Friday night at 16, and my mom and sister were on the couch praying and told me that my father had died. It's the house where all of our memories are, good and bad. So it's hallowed ground. My mom loved and treasured that house. In good years and lean years, they were able to hold on to that house. That's my mom's safe haven. It's really hard to see that violated, and the terror that she must have felt is unbearable. It's unbearable.
Tell me, while you were spending all this time in Tucson, your kids were home, what do they know?
Well, it's so hard with kids because, you want to protect them. Vale would write me all the time, Mama, any leads? Did you hear anything? Any hope? And I think that, we tried to talk to them and try to give them a little more certainty than we have, to let them grieve. And for my little nephew Olmo too, there's just a way in which this is even so much harder on Annie and Tommy and Olmo, because they're there.
They're there, yeah.
And they were there every day for my mom. They made it possible for her to stay in the house we grew up in that she loved so much. I think she always stayed in that house because I think she still felt my father there. All our memories. Let her have her space. And it's just a way in which this is just even more excruciating for them and all that they've been through.
I know it was a hard decision for you, and I know you told me about this, was coming back here, leaving Arizona to come back to New York. Why was that so difficult, that choice?
I looked out the window of the airplane and just thought, where are you?
Yeah.
That desert, that beautiful desert that she loves. Where are you?
Yeah.
How could I leave you? But my mom taught me a lot about grief. Our family knows grief. My father passed when I was 16 years old. He was only 49. It was a shock. And I remember my mom saying in those early days when Daddy died, you have to get up and decide and do. Just decide and do. And she had read that in a book that meant a lot to her and her grief. And so I always remember that. So I'm trying to decide and do. Just get up and decide and do every day.
So this is quite heartbreaking. Well, I'm not going to play the whole interview, but you could see that she blames herself a bit. And I don't think in any way should she blame herself. But that's part of survivor's guilt, as James Gagliano said. She's a survivor. She feels that her mother was kidnapped or taken because of her. And So she has all of this guilt. And, you know, I have read a lot of the comments in the chat. And I don't know, as I said, I sound like a broken record. You cannot pay a ransom if the kidnappers do not give you proof of life. That's just the facts. And you can come across and say, oh, 2 of the letters were legit. They knew things that only the kidnappers would know. I don't know if that's a fact. I don't know where you got that information from. That was never put out there anywhere. The only was putting out there was Harvey Levin, who had an interest in this, that keep sending me the letters because it's increasing my audience. It's increasing my ratings. So other than Harvey Levin, I have never heard anyone say that those letters, those kidnapping ransom notes were legit. In fact, I'm going to put a person on the screen right now, and he's a guy I have tremendous respect for, retired Orange County prosecutor Matt Murphy. And I just want you to listen to what he said. And here's a guy with a great deal of experience in crime and especially in prosecuting homicide.
And they already arrested one in Hawthorne, California, not far from where I am now. It's utterly parasitic. It's horrible. I hope they prosecute them all. But I don't believe there are kidnappers. I think this was a body removal from the very beginning. The blood droplets, she was obviously injured inside the house. One of the big myths in this case, guys, is that she was alive when her pacemaker separated from the Apple Watch. That's not necessarily the case. The pacemakers keep going after the heart has stopped. A lot of people don't know that, unless technology has radically changed since the last elderly person with a pacemaker. I worked in one of those cases before. Pacemakers keep going. Anybody that runs a funeral home will tell you that. It's a problem with cremations. So look, this is based on just what's been available publicly. It's only my opinion, but I think she was dead inside the house.
So obviously we've seen these appeals by the family, and then, that were very scripted. And then we see Savannah Guthrie obviously appealing to the public, going off script and talking directly to the public. Is the family aware that these ransom notes are not real? What are they in on what the FBI might be thinking?
Well, whenever you have a missing case and you're dealing with the loss of a loved one, it is the worst thing anybody can ever experience too, guys. It's death is horrible. We all go through that. Death due to murder is the worst of the worst, and death due to a missing person when you're not sure, it creates apoplectic grief, and you have it's called suffering hope. You've got these families, so of course they're going to hold out hope that it's real, and the FBI has to treat them like it's real, which is one of the things that is so insidious and awful about the people who try to take advantage of situations like this. By calling in, they're helping the murderer. I think personally, and this is my bias because my sympathies are totally with the family here, especially the kids of this poor woman. But I think they should prosecute these scammers as accessories after the fact to murder. So I think that there should be, a hammer brought down on them, because this is not okay, because the person who benefits most is the killer or killers, and the people who suffer most are the poor innocent families.
So what's your theory, Matt? I mean, we know they've searched the sister's house. They were searching the septic tank, or could this just be random violence?
Right now, guys, it could be anything. Tucson has a history that a lot of people don't know about. Tucson has kidnappings for ransom all the time. The problem is they're all cartel related, so that doesn't fit. When I first heard about this, my mind, after 4 years in sexual assault and 17 in homicide, was this could be a sex offender, but removing a body exponentially increases your risk of getting caught if you're the bad guy. So that also doesn't fit. Could be she walked in on a burg. But a burglary, they were very affirmative at the beginning. Of course, I haven't read any of the files. I haven't seen anything inside the house, but I sure saw those blood droplets on the outside. That reminds me of a case that I have of a missing body, Judy Bellot. We still never recovered the body. We prosecuted her. She's still in prison, killed her boyfriend, and the blood droplets outside were from a body removal. So look, the way you work these cases, from an investigative standpoint, is you do concentric rings. You start with the people that are closest, and you systematically and methodically eliminate them. You get into their cell phones, you get into their computers, you try to figure out if there's a beef, if there's any sort of conflict, and you concentrically broaden that ring. You start with the immediate family, then you go into people who work for the home. You look at neighbors. You broaden the circle. The way you prosecute these is you kind of do the same thing in front of a jury, but you do it opposite. You start out in a whodunit with the entire population of the earth. You can eliminate China. You can eliminate everybody who's in Europe. You can eliminate South, and you just go backwards into it. But look, there's an adage in Southern California. It's the same desert. If you get a body into the Pacific Ocean, or you get a body into the Mojave, and you have enough time to bury it, you don't find them in the water typically. In fact, the vast majority of times you don't. And you don't find them in the desert. And there's a great opening in Casino, and great in a very morbid, dark way now. And again, guys, I can't emphasize how much I hope I'm wrong. I have no inside information on this, but.
So this is, again, Matt Murphy, former Orange County, California prosecutor, a real smart guy. And his theory may be actually bothersome and upsetting but he thinks that for some reason she was just killed right inside the house. And that is disturbing. But he also puts together the evidence, though her blood droplets were on the front door, right? I think it would be obvious to most that they came in through the back and they left through the front door. So again, he also is qualifying his statements by saying, look, I have read none of the case. I'm not privy to any of the investigative leads on this case. So this is from my experience, what I'm believing and what I'm saying happened. From the chat, at Lana Don't Die Fan, thank you for the $9.99 super sticker. Savannah says she was in her pajamas and she had no shoes. Why did law enforcement not let the public know this info? Oftentimes in missing cases, they will include what individual was believed to have been wearing. Well, I think that was something that they wanted to keep, that only the investigators knew, in case they could get someone to interrogate. They could ask them questions such as the question that you just raised. Mike.
Yeah, you'd want to ask them, if you got a person of interest that I should say that, a suspect, you've got them in the box and you're questioning them and you want to see, what you don't ask questions often as much as you can where you don't know the answer. So you know the answers to what she was wearing. You ask that person, okay, when you took her out of that home, which door did you go? What was she wearing? What was she wrapped in? Whatever. And this way you get this information, and that will get rid of the pretenders, the crazies. That will tell you who is legit, who actually knows what they're talking about. And I think Matt Murphy, he knows that which of he speaks. And she was either deceased, unalived in the house, or shortly thereafter. But I don't believe she lasted very long after that kidnapping. I don't think she's still alive. And if she was still alive and those kidnappers had any ability to offer proof of life, they would have established contact. They reestablished contact. They would have shown a picture. Without that, I think they're trying to hide out as much as they possibly can. But I think what Matt Murphy's saying is spot on.
Jason, and I keep bringing you up here, Jason Bourne 867, because I think you firmly believe what you're saying, and that's fine. But it's unfair, though, when other law enforcement experts have stated that 2 ransom letters were credible. They don't all agree with this source. Jason, but the other thing that you have to ask yourself, who are these law enforcement sources? They're not working the case. They're outside the case. They're talking heads. They're former experts. They're retired members of the service, retired FBI, retired PD from wherever in the country, retired sheriffs, retired ATF. They're not boots on the ground. They don't have access to this case folder. So they're saying, how did they know? How do they know unless they're getting a leak from the credible investigators, from the real investigators? But other than that, how do they know? They don't. And to me, the smoking gun proof that none of these ransom notes were correct was that, again, I'm going to sound like a parrot, None of them could offer a proof of life. Therefore, the Guthries were advised by the FBI, do not pay this ransom. We cannot verify that they. And how about the knuckleheads that came forward with, oh, I saw her in Mexico, but give me one Bitcoin that's worth whatever it was, $85,000, and I'll show you where she is, or I'll tell. Come on, scammers were coming out of the woodwork, and they thought they could scam law enforcement. Guess what? I don't think you're going to scam law enforcement in a case like this. And Jason Bourne, again, and I'm glad you listened to our show, and I'm glad you're so inspired and following this case. But I just have to say that you cannot pay a ransom if there's no proof of life, period. And that makes the letters not credible. And whether Howie Levin and the rest of the TMZ staff, they're hoping that these are legit. But guess what? They're not, because they wouldn't pay the ransom. This is Jesse Weber from News Nation.
Guthrie is now entering another critical phase, and the clock may be working against investigators. It has been more than 7 weeks since the 84-year-old vanished from her home in the Catalina foothills. It is a stunning but rugged area just outside of Tucson, known for its steep, rocky terrain, washes, desert vegetation, and that's the point. Are we talking about hiding clues? Are we talking about evidence being hidden in plain sight? The search teams have already combed the area using drones and dogs and ground crews, but that landscape may be working against them. You have uneven ground, you have limited access points, spread out properties. They make it hard to know what's been missed and what hasn't. And now there's a new concern. As we head into spring, summer, those temperatures are going to rise. The desert changes. Heat, wind, wildlife can degrade or move evidence. And while thicker vegetation can make visibility.
You know, Jesse Weber, I'm just going to tell you something that you may not know. And maybe you do know. I think you have a law degree, but lots of people with law degrees seem like they don't have one. Anyway, guess what? What you're saying is that they may never find the body. And I think that's what you're implying. However, you can still build a homicide case without a body. And throughout this nation, prosecutors get convictions every single year on murder cases where there's no body recovered. Mike.
Yeah, it makes it more difficult for the jury and for the prosecutors to present their case if you don't have a body, because you don't have all the morgue pictures and the autopsy information and the medical examiner's testimony. But you can still circumstantially show that a person has to be deceased. You got blood droplets. You got the fact that she's not phoned anybody since she disappeared, that she's not used her credit card, that she's not used her debit card, that she's not texted anybody, that no one's seen her around. Neighbors haven't seen her. She hasn't gone to church. She hasn't written a letter. She hasn't ordered food. All of these things show that from a particular date, there has been no activity whatsoever to show that she's actually still alive and amongst us. And that's how, and it takes a long time to do all that because you got to get all that information. But you can circumstantially show without a body that a person has been deceased. You still have to show causation, and you have to show, motive, opportunity, ability to do this sort of thing. But you can do it. You can do it. It just takes a little bit more evidence. We call it circumstantial evidence. Okay. Yeah, it's Lady Jane C. I agree with you 100%. Yeah, removing a body from the crime scene exponentially makes it much more difficult for that person, makes it much more risky for that person. I always talk about the Joel Rifkin case. He was a serial killer based on Long Island. He was caught by a state trooper speeding, and they saw in the back of his car, I think it was like a pickup truck, he had a body wrapped in a blanket. So, removing that body may be advantageous when it comes to DNA collection and making it more difficult to prove that a person has passed. But you have to possess that body for a period of time. It's going to be in your car. You're going to have to worry about the DNA there. So, Lady Jane C., you're absolutely right.
Absolutely. Guys, you're coming up with some great comments from the chat, and we really appreciate that because I'll be the first to admit I don't know everything. And I'm pretty sure either does my co-host Mike Geary, and either does any of the talking heads on any of these stations no matter what credentials they have next to their name, especially the ones like me and Mike that we haven't been privy to the inside of this investigation. We have not read the case folder. We have not done anything and connected with the investigation of this case. So all we can do is really conjecture and make an educated guess. And we admit that not everyone does.
Even worse, all of this is happening at this point as the investigation continues with no reports of any suspects, no clear breakthrough, despite DNA testing and video analysis and thousands of tips. Yesterday, crime and cold case investigator Cheryl McCollum visited the area to see for herself what investigators are dealing with. And she joins me now live once again. Cheryl, good to see you. Thanks for taking the time. All right, what are we not seeing? You went to that terrain. What are we not seeing there that maybe a map or drone footage just can't tell us?
Jesse, it is unforgiving. I mean, the plants can cut you. There are rattlesnakes. There are bobcats. There are mountain lions. There are black bears. The ground is so hard. It's like cement. There's just rocks everywhere. And then you've got extreme heat. It was 105 the day I landed. So I just have a whole new respect for what they are trying to accomplish here.
That raises two questions. One, is it so expansive that despite these search efforts from law enforcement, they just can't look at everything there? Or two, you're making me think about all the dangers there. A suspect or suspects, do they really want to go out there and try to dump evidence? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe it would be too hazardous for them. Two perspectives there.
Listen, I think when I looked at it is vast and there's a lot of danger there, but you know, canines would have limited time they could work. That's the first thing that I thought about. It's not like you can take these dogs out there for half a day. They wouldn't be able to do it. But I think somebody, if they were to ride out in this desert, they could easily dispose of evidence and then get gone. I mean, they wouldn't have to be out of the car more than 30 seconds.
So what can they do now? You know, I've had this continuing conversation with Brian Enton about the Cajun Navy maybe being a part of this. If you're telling me that there's areas, let me ask you, I'm just going to ask you point blank. Do you think there's areas that the investigators, law enforcement haven't searched? And if so, what do they do right now?
Of course, there's places they haven't searched. I don't believe she's in Tucson. I think she might just be outside. When you're talking about folks like the Cajun Navy and Texas EcuSearch, why in the world would you turn these people away that know how to search in all terrain? They've got horses, they've got ATVs, they've got equipment and people and experts. We should be utilizing them. There's no doubt about that.
Is there any technology that could help if you're dealing with that kind of area? And does it, whether it's picking up certain forensic material, heat signature, whatever it is, and does it get complicated, like I mentioned, that we're entering into the even warmer months?
We've got 7 weeks in. A lot of that technology is not what we need. We need boots on the ground. We need somebody to notice something small, maybe a bedroom slipper, maybe jewelry. We need somebody there on the ground looking, not up in a helicopter. You know, even walking. Things, if you drop a shell casing or a pair of scissors or hair, it just becomes indigenous. I mean, it just absorbs itself almost into this terrain because there are so many colors between the rocks and the dirt and the sand and the plants. It's very difficult to distinguish anything that you might be seeing that is not native and belong there. And you need to walk it.
And the wildlife's a problem too, like in terms of destruction of evidence.
Yes. Wildlife is going to be a huge problem. I mean, you're talking about, and I'll just say anybody, not Nancy Guthrie, but any human remains out there, you're not talking about weeks to decompose. You're talking about days. And then with the wildlife activity, you already said it, Jesse, they would be spread out. So again, we're not looking for a body. We need to have boots on the ground with people that know what they're looking for and as many volunteers as they can get.
Thank you for.
Hello.
Atlanta Don't Die fan. Savannah said back door propped open. Why do you expect that was? Why would Perp leave it propped open? Potentially because one Perp propped open the door for the other Perp who was busy doing what he was doing on the front door. And then they went in through the back and they exited out the front door. That's the only thing that makes sense to me at this time. And, you know, for 52 days, 53 days, everyone was saying, how did they get in? No one knew. Well, now we at least know that, don't we? And that was something that was being kept very close to the vest. No one, well, the Sheriff Nanos was saying, initially he said there was signs of a break-in, and that was incorrect, right? So some of the things we want to question also now is like, who's running this investigation now? I believe the FBI is running it now. I don't believe that Sheriff Nanos is running it any longer. I could be wrong. I could be absolutely wrong, but there are so many theories in this case. And through Savannah Guthrie's appearance on the Today Show, she let us know a couple of things. And one was she believed 2 of the ransom notes were legit, which I didn't see them, but I'm going to disagree with her because, again, no proof of life. She told us that the rear door was propped open, right? She told us that she felt that her mother was targeted because of her. So we learned some things today that were not obvious on other. Well, we assumed, but now we have certain proof. Some of the things you can believe, others you can take with a grain of salt, which I don't believe any of those ransom notes were legit. Mike, your thoughts?
Yeah, Bill, I believe that the FBI is really in the driver's seat on this case. I would think from experience that there's probably 1 or 2 of the, Pima County's best homicide detectives working this case, probably in a room with equipped with all their information, like an information center, temporary headquarters, and they're working with the FBI. But I believe the FBI is 100% in control of all the information that's coming in, all the possible evidence that's coming in, all of the tests that are being done, all of the search warrants that they need. All of that, I believe, is all being driven by the FBI. But I think that there's going to be at least 1, maybe 2 Pima County homicide detectives who will be liaisoning for whatever information that the FBI needs on local matters. But I think that's how it's set up, and I think that's probably the best way to go. I would like to think at this point, Sheriff Nanos has proven not to be the kind of person that you would want to have real inside information at this point. And the less that he knows at this point, I think it's the best for everybody.
I agree with you 110%, Mike. Yeah, that's absolutely correct. Folks, just let you know that the Police Off the Cuff podcast is sponsored by FanDuel on the Believe Network, and they help support our show. So this was some new information today. I hope everyone that listened, everyone that was here, and yeah, the chat has been excellent lately. S. Sutton, 1958. Ashley Banfield said her source said the back door was open, and she reported that on day 2 or 3. She also reported that the son-in-law was the perp. So you can either take that with a grain of salt. She gets information, insider information, but guess what? You have egg all over your face when your insider information turns out not to be true. So, and what she said also was potentially libelous. If you don't have proof and you're telling this person's the suspect, that could be a little bit dangerous. That could result in lawsuits. I certainly wouldn't say anything like that. I'd be very, very, being first is not that important to me. When you have Jacoby and Myers coming after you, So some of the things that lots of the reporters have said have turned out not to be true. So we try to keep it about what we know. Mike, your final thoughts.
Yeah, I think you're right about Ashley Banfield. You got to be careful. Savannah is the public person, and you could say mean things about Savannah because she's in the public eye. You could do that with actors and politicians. They're part of the public eye, and therefore you can say things. But when it comes to her family, you got to be very careful. Those are private citizens, and the standard of defamation to prove defamation against them is much lower than it is for a public figure. You got to be careful, even if your inside information tells you that this is the way it is. You got to double check and triple check that before you even begin to even hint about that. And you got to do your due diligence. You have to do it. So therefore, Banfield may have some inside information, but you got to vet it properly. And as you say, being number one and getting clicks and everything else isn't worth the damage to your reputation, because in the future, you may not get that inside information if the person who gave it to you felt like you just ran with it irresponsibly. So yes, Ashley Banfield may have talked about the back door being propped open on day 2 or 3, but you hesitate when you hear some of the other things that she's put out there. You're not so sure about the accuracy, and so therefore that's why we hesitate sometimes. We do not want to put stuff out there that's rumors or that's just flying off the handle. Or no, we want to just think of it the way a prosecutor would, the way a detective would. That's the way we handle the information here.
Absolutely. Lucky -Z8X, Sarge, do you think Nanos was focused on the family and had tunnel vision? I just don't think that Nanos is equipped or has the talent to run an investigation of this nature, of this scope. And I think that he should be relieved of his command. I really think that he's done things on this case that defy logic to me, and I don't want to go over re-beating him up. I think he's been beat up enough, but I would be relieved that if he no longer is running this case. And, you hate to see the FBI take over a case from a local law enforcement agency, but in a case like this, it might be a good move, or appoint a new sheriff that may be a little bit more investigatively competent than a Sheriff Nanos. And I would applaud that, because this is a tough case. Everyone that's working it has said that this is a very tough case. So, folks, I want to thank everyone for tuning in today. I think we got some good interaction with the chat, and I applaud that. And I want to welcome all the new cuffers to the show. Thank you for subscribing. Have a good day, everyone. I'm Bill Cannon from Police Off the Cuff. On behalf of myself and Professor Mike Geary, thanks for tuning in. Have a great day, and God bless.
One episode just ain't enough.